Hello and welcome to 11FS Spotlight. I'm Benjamin Ensor. In this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industries to try and understand what gets them going, what gets them growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Janine Hirt, CEO at Innovate Finance. How are you doing today, Janine?
Hi, Benjamin. Thanks so much for having me here.
So on the show today, we're going to talk about your career, Janine, and the importance of supporting new talent. So let's start off. Can you give us a 1-minute sort of elevator pitch for Innovate Finance? What does it do?
Yeah, sure. So Innovate Finance is the voice of UK Fintech. We're the industry body membership association representing global and domestic fintech here in the UK. And it is our mission to support the next generation of technology-led innovators to create a more transparent, more democratic, and more efficient financial services for all.
So speaking of the next generation, you yourself have been with Innovate Finance since the beginning, but you've recently transitioned from Chief Operations Officer to Chief Executive. How did that go? How was the move? How are you finding the new role?
I always say it was actually really easy because I have such a fantastic team behind me. Because ultimately what really drives the success of Innovate Finance is the people that work for it and the members that we have in the community. So I also had great leader to follow in the footsteps of. Charlotte Crosswell was fantastic in terms of mentor. But it's been a really exciting experience. And you're right, Benjamin, I was with Innovate Finance since about 2014, 2015, part of the initial leadership team as well. And it's just been a great journey to see not only the entire ecosystem mature and evolve, but also Innovate Finance mature and evolve as an organization as well.
I think you've just told us this, but what's your favorite part of the job? I think you said it's the people, but maybe...
People. Yeah,
okay.
The people, it's the members. I think we're so lucky to be in a space where almost everyone you come into contact with on a daily basis is passionate about change, is excited, is dedicated, really wants to see a transformation in the industry. And I don't think you find that in every sector and in every type of role. So I would say the members, our community, the entire ecosystem, and then our team is just fantastic as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to Innovate Finance? Because most of our viewers will have picked up that you don't have a perfect British accent. So how did you end up running an industry association in London?
Yeah. Well, I am from the US. I grew up mostly in New York. In the sort of tri-state area on the East Coast in the States, but spend most of my time in the city in New York. But I'm actually an American, German, a Swiss, and a British citizen. So four passports. There are two things we don't talk about at the dinner table. One is Brexit and the other is football. But my father was a refugee from East Germany, and my mother was Swiss, and they both relocated to the U.S. where I was born and raised. And then my husband and I decided to move over to the U.K. just a little bit over a decade ago. And I had spent 2 other years here for undergraduate. So I spent a year at Oxford, and I did my master's at the London School of Economics as well. So I've always been a fan of the U.K. and particularly of London. So really pleased to call this our home.
Wow, what a fantastic family history, or fascinating family history. It sounds like there's some tricky parts in there as well. But so what first interested you in the financial services industry? How did you wind up in financial services?
So my background has always essentially been a reflection or a cross-section between industry and policy. And before I worked at Innovate Finance, I headed up corporate relations at Chatham House for many years, so the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And part of the areas I was most interested in and worked most closely with was along the lines of financial inclusion, financial wellness, looking at how we can really transform the industry. And that brought me to be looking much more closely at fintechs and at the innovators and the new players, the disruptors. I was particularly interested at that time in the crowdfunders, the peer-to-peer lenders, looking at what they were doing in terms of democratizing the entire financial services sector. And that's what led me initially to be interested into the broader conversation around fintech and the broader narrative. And so when I spoke with Innovate Finance, I was incredibly excited to really join what was then very much a movement in terms of changing financial services industries.
Very interesting. I'm particularly interested by what you said about inclusion, because I think, as we think about the sort of bigger picture, that's one of the things I'd really like us to chat about today, is particularly thinking about sort of nurturing skills and talent of new generations. So not only financial inclusion in terms of inclusion for everyone in the financial system, but also trying to make the financial services industry more inclusive and provide equal opportunities to people from all backgrounds, because there are parts of the financial services industry that are quite diverse, and there are parts that are not. And, there are people I know who've had bad experiences in companies because, people have taken, have treated them badly because of their background, because of their origins and so on. So can you tell us a little bit about, how you're trying to influence that at Innovate Finance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really core to all of the work that we do. And I think it's fair to say that most of us tend to be in the sector because we want to see a fair financial system. We have a number of programs that focus on financial wellness, financial inclusion. And one of my 3 priorities going forward is looking specifically at the positive impact that fintech has on society more broadly. And that very clearly brings in a few points. One is around the role of fintech with regards to the journey to net zero, but the other is specifically looking at financial inclusion and financial wellness. And I think we need to look at new products, new providers, new players in the ecosystem that can offer more individuals and more SMEs the right product at the right stage in their life. And so we are seeing, I would say, an increased focus on the role that fintech can play on financial wellness. Part of that is as a response of the COVID pandemic. Mm-hmm. So you had suddenly in March of 2020 this scenario where a lot of the incumbent firms were forced to move their services online really without any prior warning. And some of them were not able to do so. So fintechs were able to step in to fill that gap. Either they provided those services directly to the end consumer, or they worked with the institutions to enable them to better provide those to the consumer. And you had a scenario where trust in digital applications increased significantly. Nesta did a great report last year that cited the increase in trust amongst individuals across the UK in using mobile and money banking applications. But you also saw an entire segment of the economy, SMEs, very much rely on alternative lenders to support them through distribution of the C-bills or the B-bills, and really enabling them to continue moving forward. And so there has been an increased focus, I would say, on the role that fintech can play in terms of increasing our financial inclusion and financial wellness.
Fascinating. One of the things you've been doing is you've been starting right at the beginning by launching a program to start trying to educate children in schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about the fintech for schools and sort of what prompted you to start this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are really passionate at Innovate Finance about financial education as well. And alongside our partner Deloitte, we launched a program called Fintech in Schools with the aim of ensuring that our younger generation have the tools and have the knowledge to be able to have financial services really work for them and not the other way around. And we also wanted to utilize this as a platform to show individuals that fintech is a great career opportunity. And it's something that no matter what walk of life you come from is a really ideal career option going forward. So we've set up a few different programs from within our wider Fintech for Schools program. We have master classes that have brought together some leading experts across the industry to talk about simple concepts in financial services, or actually I should say complex concepts in financial services, but making them simple to understand. We've also had a number of our members go into schools, speaking to children and trying to really inspire them very, very directly. And we have a great app where people can also utilize the resources there in order to increase their education, increase their awareness. Because we very much feel that there needs to be ultimately a structural change in terms of educating younger generations to make them more financially capable as well.
Yes, because you said that one of your interests, your sort of personal interest was about public policy and how that influences society and so on. And if you look at the internet, there's obviously a huge number of sort of people trying to give out good financial education, but there's also other people potentially trying to persuade people to invest their money, maybe part with their money. Why do you think there isn't more financial education in the UK? And do you look at other markets elsewhere in the world and say, they're doing a better job? Are there lessons to be learned? Are there things that the UK could and should be doing better, do you think?
Benjamin, this is such an interesting question, and I've been asked this before. I think there is an argument to be made that if you look, for example, at the United States the United States versus the UK, I'm not thinking about the education at the school level, but there's really almost a mistrust of government in the US. So no one thinks that in the US, the government will take care of you later in life. And so there is this drive that you need to be able to learn about financial services, and you need to be able to take care of yourself and your family. So I think there's more of an inspiration, maybe a negative inspiration, to get that education and to understand and also to use some new technology in order to enable you to do so. Whereas in the UK, there is really a trust, and it's probably well placed, that you will be safe as you get older. And there is a real trust in the government, and there potentially is less of an appetite, therefore, to learn specifically about financial services. I think also it's less common here to talk about finances. It's openly discussed in the United States in many circles, maybe less so here in the UK. But that is something that we're trying to change and we're trying to fix as well. And it is interesting because the UK has by far one of the best adoption rates of fintech in the world. 71% before COVID, 76% after COVID. So there's really a massive awareness here about how to use some of the new players, utilize fintech, but just making sure that broadens out and touches all generations on all levels is really important. And Benjamin, we were talking a little bit about my sort of background and my interest in fintech. I came from relatively modest background in the United States. My dad worked for the same company for 50 years before he passed away, and he made a very, very low salary. He was an engineer. And towards the remainder of his life, he never actually retired. Towards the remainder of his life, he started hearing about all these players, one of them being Vanguard, where you could invest a little bit, and try and make something from that little bit yourself. And he was so proud of just being able to do that. And it really showed you how it really showed me how when people are given the tools to be able to try and build and develop and create somewhat of a safety net or even a sort of, support for their whole life, there's a real impact there that can be made as well.
Definitely. Vanguard is an inspiring company, I think. There's a lot to learn from some of the work that Vanguard has done over the years. One of the things I'm really interested in about is not only what you've been doing for sort of school children, but also the way you're trying to encourage more people, young people, to come into the industry, to persuade people that fintech is a good and interesting career choice. One of the things we're particularly interested in at 11FS, and I think people in the industry more widely are interested in, is creating more diversity and more inclusion within the industry. We are seeing more women, more people from diverse backgrounds sort of getting into fintech and in tech. Do you think the industry is doing enough? What's your perspective on that? Do you think what more can be done? What more should be done?
I think we need to know loads more. So I think we are doing a good job in terms of awareness, and there are fantastic initiatives across the industry that are seeing some real momentum, seeing some real movement, but we're nowhere near where we should be in terms of number of females in executive positions, in terms of women working across the entire industry, and in terms of the pay gap as well. I think PwC put out a report that the impact of COVID has obviously disproportionately been on females, but they said it will take double the rate in order for us to regain the advancements that we made before COVID in the next 10 years. It also said that it'll take 112 years for us to cover the pay gap, which is, just sit with that number for a minute. That's not fintech. I just want to say that's across industry, but that's insane. So there's still a lot more to be done. And at Innovate Finance, we have a very, very popular program called our Women in Fintech program. It is comprised of a number of Women in Fintech Power Hours, where we just try to talk to individual leaders in industry about their journeys, the obstacles, the challenges they had to face, and really get some learnings from them that we can share with females across all levels of industry, junior right the way through up to chairs of organizations and companies. We also have a Women in Fintech Power List, which again is about recognizing the phenomenal contributions that women have made in all levels of industry in fintech. We also need to do a lot more in order to support female entrepreneurs and female founders, especially in terms of getting investment and capital. So this is an area where we're very keen on supporting too.
And I completely agree with everything you're saying. It's not just women, right? Of course, I mean, there are multiple groups that sort of are sometimes disadvantaged. But yes. What are your next steps with some of the programs you're running at Innovate Finance? What are some of the new things you're planning, or how you're going to sort of drive some of these programs?
Yeah, so I have 3 priority areas that I'm quite keen to focus on for the next year or so. One of those is about ensuring that fintech is seen as a key pillar of global Britain's hard and soft power, because it's absolutely critical that policymakers, government, stakeholders understand how important fintech is as we redevelop our identity in a post-COVID, post-Brexit world. We have always in the UK been a leader when it comes to technology. We've always been a leader when it comes to financial services. We've always been a leader when it comes to innovation. And fintech is just the culmination of that as well. So making sure that that's understood at all levels is really quite key. But that also means we cannot rest on our laurels, because while we are very much a global leader in fintech, there are a lot of other hubs that are working to catch up with us as well. And the Khalifa Review, which Innovate Finance was delighted to serve as the co-secretariat for, really paved the way and created a roadmap for what we have to do here in the UK to continue to hold that leadership position. So making sure that we increase investment and capital, making sure that we continue to have access to great skills and talent, be those domestic or international, and also making sure that we continue to have a regulatory framework that is supportive of the fintech community. Is very important. You know, we had $5.7 billion US come into the UK fintech ecosystem in the first 6 months of 2021. That has smashed records, annual records, by far the highest we've ever seen. So let's make sure that we continue the momentum. And that means also including and increasing relationships with our international partners to help startups as they scale abroad, but also help scale-ups choose the UK as a scaling destination of choice. My second focus is around regulation, because I think it's fair to say we are at a really important time for regulation. There's a renewed focus on protecting the consumer. We need to make sure that we don't forget how important innovation is to benefit the consumer. And these new products and new services serve in many cases and in many ways to actually make financial services, as we've been saying all along, much more democratic. So finding that line between protecting the consumer but also enabling innovation to thrive is really important. And we've seen some good initiatives. We've always seen great initiatives coming out of the FCA. One of the reasons we're such a leader, we have such a proactive regulator, FCA, PRA also excellent. And we're continuing to see some initiatives like the Scale Box and the Regulatory Nursery. But again, don't want to rest on our laurels, need to see that momentum continuing. And then the third priority is fintech for good, which we talked about as well.
Super, super interesting. I think the regulatory question is really, really interesting because, you know, London particularly had some structural advantages from the City of London and, you know, historic so on. But also some of those advantages were created by, you know, some of the way that London and the UK was regulated. And, you know, we've obviously seen other markets like Singapore and Hong Kong and so on, you know, with some similarly open-minded regulation that's enabled a lot of competition. How do you feel the balance is now in regulation in terms of the balance between sort of fintechs and, you know, traditional organizations? Obviously, when open banking came in, there were, you know, and some of the rules around aggregation and so on, there was a little bit of a sense of, hang on, is this a level playing field here? Are people being disadvantaged? Should screen scraping be allowed, et cetera, et cetera? Do you feel that we've got a level playing field between the sort of new, disruptive, innovative fintechs and the established firms that are, you know, sometimes comfortable where they are? Do you feel that the regulation is level, or do you think there are still a couple of areas that need to be addressed?
I think there are definitely, it's a great question. I think there are definitely a few areas that we still need to address. And again, I think the FCA is one of the absolutely most proactive regulators in the world. There are, however, things across the board that need to be made sure that we listen to the fintech community as well. And it's across different areas of regulation too. So thinking, for example, even beyond regulation, but looking at the C-bills and the B-bills loans, looking at the accreditation of fintech lenders, it took too long. We want to make sure that was getting done on a quicker basis. We saw Funding Circle, by the time they were accredited, they distributed more than 27% of all the CBILS loans, which is really, really astonishing. So making sure that those processes happen faster, more efficiently, and in favor of the fintechs and the disruptors is really very key. I think the initiative that has come out of the Khalifa Review that is being developed around the scale box is also absolutely important, because if you have a smaller startup that are growing and expanding, they won't necessarily have the type of a compliance team that a large incumbent has, or the background of the experience or the resources to put to that. So that is a phenomenal initiative that we've seen coming out of the FCA as well, and we're pleased about. Now we just need to make sure that it does work for the industry, and so we are working very closely with them to feed in that fintech voice and making sure that that is heard as well. I think we're also working with various other regulators. We're working with the CMA. We have the CEO of the CMA joining us for our fintech strategy group at the end of this year to make sure, once again, that the fintech voice is heard in some of these key decisions.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because regulation can be a real burden on both, established firms and new firms trying to break into the market. I mean, it's one of the reasons why sort of RegTech is such an interesting area, because it promises to, and it does lighten the burden, but super, super interesting. Okay. We're coming towards the end of the show, so I want to finish off by asking you, Janine, a couple more questions about you, which you can answer however you like, related to fintech or not. So, what advice would you give your younger self? If you look back on your career and if you could talk to your 20-year-old self again, what would you say to yourself?
So I would probably say, and Benjamin, it's a good question, because hindsight is always 20/20, but I would probably say keep doing what you're passionate about, but also your difference and what makes you unique is your strength, and build on that and know that and own that as well. Excellent. Well, your passion has come through very clearly in the course of our conversation. So I was going to ask you what's next for Innovate Finance, but you've already laid out 3 very clear priorities. I particularly loved your focus on protecting consumers and making sure that we get the innovation that helps consumers, and that's delivered in a safe and good way. Is there anything that worries you in the market today when you look at fintech? And I realize you've got to be a little bit careful perhaps in how you speak, but are there any areas that you think are possibly areas of concern for, from a consumer standpoint or a customer standpoint? I'm really keen for the UK that we continue to sit ahead of innovation, because I think we are at a different stage now. It's post-COVID, it's post-Brexit environment. There's a lot of opportunity. There is support coming vocally from government. There's support coming vocally from policymakers, regulators, and understanding that fintech is important. But it's also very easy to quickly lose that. So making sure that we have the momentum that is needed to ensure that UK stays at the forefront and is a global leader in fintech is absolutely critical to me. We have more investment coming in than the next 5 European hubs behind us. We're second only in the world to the US. We consistently have been. We all know those numbers. But again, I say it quite often, but we can't rest on our laurels, because now is the time that we need to continue this momentum, especially if we're going to see real true change across the financial services system. So making sure that we lead that way globally is really key for me, and not falling back to old demeanor.
Excellent. The thing that frustrates me about these Spotlight episodes is they're not long enough. I would happily talk to you all day. So we're coming to the end of the show. So Janine, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. Where can people find out more about you, more about Innovate Finance and everything you're getting up to?
Well, you can contact me on LinkedIn or on Twitter or just on email, and you can find Innovate Finance on www.innovatefinance.com. And please do join us for events. We've got a great event coming up on the 13th of October looking at fintech for good. So financial inclusion, financial wellness, and also fintech's journey in the road to net zero. So please do join us for that. A lot of it will be virtual, but hybrid event too. So come in person if you can.
Wonderful. Fintech for good. I love it. Right. That's all we have time for this week. So make sure you follow Janine, you follow Innovate Finance, and that you follow 11FS on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram to stay updated with all the cool stuff we're doing. And if you enjoy our show, do subscribe to the 11FS YouTube channel, where you can also catch up on previous episodes, some of which don't feature me. Have a great week, everyone. Goodbye.